Yes, absolutely. Um, well, I started to define myself as European when I was very young, actually, because of my origins, my two families. I'm I'm the son of two borders, the border between Italy and Austria, and the border between Italy and Slovenia and Croatia. So I'm Italian, and I was grown up in Italy, and yeah, I was schooled. I followed all my education when I was a student in Italy, so I'm absolutely Italian in that sense. But my origins are a bit strange compared to the, let's say, the average Italian person, as the family of my mom is an Austrian family from of noble origins. One of my ancestors was the lieutenant of Maria Teresa. So he ruled Lombardy and Veneto at that time, in the time of the Enlightenment, actually. And on the other side, my family is from the Veneto region, so the region of Venice. And yeah, the funny part is that during the First World War, my ancestors were shooting one the other from the different sides. So that, I think, shaped my life completely. So I always found the boundaries between European states very artificial because of that. And well, my mom talked to me in German, and I was exposed to the Veneto regional language, but I had to speak the regular Italian. So that's why I became a linguist, I think, a social linguist in particular. And yeah, so that that was the start. Apart from my family, in which I remember the first, let's say, large family gathering. We decided to do that in Verona, because Verona is on the crossroad between the line with Austria, north, south, and with the east, with let's say the Slavic countries. And when I was a kid, I didn't know how to speak with my cousins, because we had too many languages. I was an Italian speaker, we had a German speaker, we had a Croatian speaker, French speaker. So I say, okay, we have a problem here. Then we played football. Football was universal. So that was the point. But apart from that family stories, I think that when I was, let's say, a very young would-be intellectual, when I was in high school, um, the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. And in that moment, I said, okay, I'm witnessing history, and Europe can be finally reunited. Well, I was born in 1974, so you can imagine, 15-year-old and so on. I was reading, among the others, Orwell's Anima Fama in 1984, and also the books by Primo Levi about the surviving from the lagers. And I think that this crossroad of readings and this event really said, okay, we can do Europe. Europe is something that we should really do now. And in a sense, I felt a kind of responsibility. So that was my first moment that shaped my life for being European. But just to becoming a European, it's an identity to be built, not something that was given to me. Well, the very recent one was there was the Brexit. Actually, it was very disappointing of all parties, how all parties behaved. But even more recently, I think that 2020 was a missed opportunity, because my perception is that by the end, each country tries to save itself without really caring on the others. I mean, it could be the opportunity to build up European health policy. We didn't do that in 2020. And I'm really concerned, worried about the future of the European Union. I think we need it. I think this is a big challenge, but I don't think it's something that we will do in few years, not even few months. I mean, few years. We need something, but it's difficult. It's absolutely difficult because it means that national governments should resign for a substantial part of their sovereignty. And that was, I mean, what happened in building up the European Union piece after piece. But we are in a moment now in which, let's say, the political winds go exactly on the opposite direction. People wanted to have more sovereignty for nation states. When I went to China and I lived there for a couple of months as a visiting professor, I understood that we are really small. The order of magnitude is different. So we don't understand that if we are not united, we can be we will be very peripheral from a geopolitical point of view, I think. Yeah, let me think about it, because there were not so many, I think. Um, well, it's something maybe that can surprise you. I think when there was this case, Mario Monti against Microsoft in 2003, that was something, because I say, oh, wow, this is something new. This is something that is not, let's say, in the flow of business as usual, but was something different. It was a moment in which the European Union was saying to a big player in the digitalization, Microsoft, say, wait a minute, you are not free to do whatever you want. There are rules, European rules. That was something that for me was really exciting. Then the results were, let's say, halfway. I think that we should, as Europeans, be more brave in the field of digitalization. I was mentioning Gallica before, which is a great example, but it's absolutely French. It's French. And if you think about the most important companies, for example, of Germany. I mean, Germany is the biggest economic power in terms of member states in Europe, for obvious reasons. There are more than 90 millions. It's like that, okay? And they have no big player in digitalization. There are no German companies in that. I mean, the assets of the German economy are very old. So this is, I think, a proof on the direction we should have. I mean, European digitalization should be an opportunity to build a European way of digitalization, which is not copycat the American ones. So we are relying all our political discourse on Facebook and Twitter. I'm sorry, what are we doing? I mean, this episode of Trump, this recent episode, it's only an episode that happens all the time to all people. We are ruled by algorithms. So the only way to counterbalance that is to control the algorithms. If we give the algorithms outside Europe, we are lost. We have to reprise the algorithms to have European algorithms. That could be a good motto if you want. Well, I think the Schengen Treaty. The fact that I can move without, because before the pandemic, I define myself as a European commuter between Amsterdam and Milan, because I had and still have my family in Milan, and I work here part-time. So now I decided last year to move completely here because that's not possible anymore. But that was marvelous. The distance in terms of time between Amsterdam and Milan is less than 4 hours. If you take a train, you have to go to Rome, it's more than 4. So what's distant? What's next? And that's the point, I think. And this is thanks to the Schengen Treaty. That's absolutely the best thing. That changed my life. Fair taxation. Get rid of fiscal paradises in Europe and go for fairness in taxation. And because this, I think this will change all the discourse about the recovery funds, all the problems we had with Greece, as you remember, all these things. We have to I think that the next step into integration, concrete step, will be this. We are going for economics, okay, let's do it. Also in the public sphere. But that means having the nucleus, the kernel of a real European government. So, I mean, I have some friends that they work in academia. In particular, I have one of my dearest friend who worked in Italy, Belgium, UK, and the Netherlands for some years. She moved because of non-permanent contracts, as it happens when, especially when you're young. But that was, let's say, more than 10 years. Okay, I think 12 or 13 years, different countries, and she paid taxes for the pension here and there. All this money will be wasted because it's not enough to get a pension in any country. So there is an unclear space of what happens to people like that, because how to compensate it, it's not clear. So maybe she will have minimal pensions in some of the states, but it's really completely unclear. This is unfair. It's really unfair because it's another, I mean, it's another concrete barrier to mobility. You have to have at least the protocols for that. For in my view, the best way to solve it is to have a common taxation system with a common pension system. And that starts really to feel that we are going to be European. Oh, that's a very nice question. In a very limited way, because I had already, let's say, quite a definite, well, defined, quite a defined perception of the EU. The thing that changed here is the perception of space, because I didn't realize until I took a Thalys to Brussels how much Amsterdam and Brussels are very close for Italian standards, because it's like having a train from Milan to Rome. And on the perception for the Dutch persons, oh, you're going to Brussels, it's so far, you know? And say, well, it depends on your perspective, because this is not so a big country. So for me, having a meeting there and then coming back in the day was not so strange. I mean, it happened in my life that I did something like that when I was living in Milan and going to Rome. So yeah, so I really realized that living in, let's say, a medium-sized country like the Netherlands is different from living in a large country in terms of geographical space, because people have a different perception of space and of boundaries, again. So this, I think, it's the most important thing. The other point is that, well, I was living previously in Milan, which I think it's the most European city in Italy, but Amsterdam is on another level because here you have the feeling that this is not completely a Dutch city in the sense that I think half of the residents are not Dutch in terms of passports. So you're not judged for your origins. That's not a problem. In Milan, it's still like that. It's still, if you are not, let's say, Italian, you are felt as a foreigner. Here, this feeling of being a foreigner is not very strong, I should say. It's very weak. And the perception of that became very clear when I started to know a bit better the country. When I went to Utrecht, to Rotterdam, say, okay, Amsterdam is different. Amsterdam is not the Netherlands, like Paris is not France in a sense. Because when I went to the other cities, I lived in Padua. I lived for a short time in L'Aquila, in Turin, and I know quite. I have, let's say, an extended social network in Italy. I've seen that well the sense of pride of the city in Milan is not linked to the birthplace. If you work in Milan, you are a Milanese, and this is like being an Amsterdamer in a sense. But in Milan, you have to be Italian. Otherwise, it's not so straightforward. While you can live for 30 years in Turin, you will never be a Turinese. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. It's really a perception of sense of belonging and perception of the importance of the birthplace, which is something that really I think it's one of the most unfair parts of human nature, because after all, the birthplace is a lottery. That's it. Well, the biggest challenges I think are we have to build up a space in which Europeans can do something that they don't do. I mean, an agora, a space to do politics together. We don't do politics together. And I'm witnessing this exactly now because my adopted country, the Netherlands, and my original country, Italy, have political crises together, very different. And I'm reading Italian newspapers and Dutch newspapers, reading the section inside and outside, and say, come on, you don't know how to talk to each other because you cannot really, you have to talk the same language. And of course, we don't have a common European language, as you know. And if you read my biography, you can think about what I would think is the most opportune candidate for that, and it's not English. But okay, that's another story, of course. Yes, absolutely. We have to have a vehicle to become European. And I think that Esperanto is the best candidate, even if the Esperanto identity is not built upon the European one. It goes to another level, in spite of the will of the founder, because Zamenhof in 1915 wrote an appeal to the diplomats. 1915, okay, in the just when the First World War was starting to become a real European war. It was not anymore time to playing football on Christmas, okay? Because of the chemical weapons, of course. And he was saying, when the war will be finished, you, dear diplomats, have to build up the European states of Europe. And the only way to do that is to have a common language that does not belong to any member state in modern times, let's say. And that's something that really shaped me. In fact, I started to let's say to get interested to Esperanto because I wanted to build up my Europeanhood, let's say, through that book by Umberto Eco, The Search for the Perfect Language. I think it's the title in English. I was reading that in the original Italian, that went out in 1993. When there was this beautiful editorial movement with Jacques Le Goff and others, writing essays and translating in major languages just to try to have a common conversation. It was half success. And you remember 1993 is very important for the Treaty of Maastricht. So I think we really need it. We cannot rely on translation only. We cannot rely on saying, well, we can do it like Switzerland. Well, Switzerland has another magnitude and has 3 national languages plus 1, because Romansh is not on the same level of the others, and we have already 24. And English is challenged in many because it's very overload. There is a lot of overload upon English for obvious reasons, for political reasons, for the history of English, and also now the Brexit. And people say, well, we should come back to French and something like that. And it's always the same stories, this vice cycle all the time. So I think we have to be brave, to have vision, and to try to have a leap. But of course, I'm not naive, and I'm perfectly aware that the language part comes after politics. I mean, we have to have a political project that should be sustained by the political opinions of the European citizens. And this is the main big problem. Still now, a lot of people don't know, are not well informed about Esperanto through Europe. So this is something that really astonished me all the time. And one thing that I would really like, I think that we can do, is to change the way in which the European citizens can influence the European politics as citizens. For example, transnational elections. We should have European elections all over Europe in the same days. So to foster this political discourse, and why I cannot choose a Finnish candidate or a German candidate being in the Netherlands. So this is also something I would really like to have a chamber in the European Union that is really connected with the people, counterbalancing, of course, the role of the member states. That would be, I think, something that it's not so difficult to be done. We do not need to, let's say, to change the treaties, because this is very difficult. And maybe we should even question that idea of unanimity in European democracy, because this veto power that is in the hands of a single member state, we have seen that in very recent months, can really block the whole functioning of the European Union. It's time for change for how European Union works, I think. And these are 2 things that can be done, and are not, it's not right or left-winged. It's something general, structural. This is a matter of public education. I think that it's very important that public education fosters the 3 levels, which means the local or heritage level on one side, the national level, and the European level. So in my ideal world, which is a completely ideal world, of course, as I know, I'm not so naive. I would like people to choose to be literate in their original heritage language, major language. So I don't think about a very small obscure language in Africa, but language of big communication. So why not also to teach how to write, to read and write from people that have Arabic or Turkish origins, for example, because we know from research, from social linguistic research, that the second generation of migrants is very problematic because they felt refused both from the origin and both from the hosting country, which is the country where they were born, but they feel really excluded. And that's very, many times, I mean, it's not always like that, but this is a pattern. And the only thing is to be literate in at least 3 languages, which is the language of the heritage language, which can be, of course, Frisian if you are in Friesland, so a regional language, or let's say Welsh, because you are in the UK or something like that. Or if you can choose, but it's something that you can choose. Okay, if you are from a heritage language, you should be able to do that in school. The national one, of course, so to keep the level of the national languages high enough to be functioning in most domains, and then having a European pan language, which in my case is Esperanto, of course. That was what I would like to. I think that is the only way to build up a layered identity, because this is also an antidote to xenophobia, because when you have more than one group identity, then it's very difficult that you become completely xenophobic, because you have to be xenophobic of yourself or a part of yourself. I mean, I've seen that in general, early bilinguals are more open to discussion because of their origins. They have more than one point of view. It's very easy. I think that we have to counter, to be very short, to keep the long story very short, is we have to counter, to fight against, we have to fight against the monolingualism, after all. This is really the thing that we have to fight against. We have this romantic idea of one state, one language. But if you think about the history of the human species, plurilingualism is the normal state of humanity. Monolingualism is a handicap, is an exception in general terms in the history of humanity. Most societies have more than one language. So we have to get over this romantic idea, finally. It's really very recent, it's 200 years, no more. I mean, what's compared to the history of humankind? It's nothing. If we have, let's say, a shared policy of real mobility, which is not only mobility of the persons. We have mobility of the wares, mobility of the persons, but mobility of the possibility to intervene and to be informed is different. When I moved here, of course, I moved here because I have a decent level of English from an academic point of view. I had no exposure to Dutch. Well, it's not completely true, because my mom was studying Dutch when I was a kid. So something is in my mind, but it's really remote. And I've seen that if you do not learn Dutch here, you can perfectly survive, but you are in a bubble. You are really at the margins of society. There can be worse positions, of course. In other countries, you simply are even not, you cannot even survive. I'm not blaming the Dutch people for that bubble effect if you don't know Dutch, because it's already a very positive thing that you can come here and work, and everyone is very pleased for that with English. and try to have a vision for a step beyond that. Because I mean, in other countries, you cannot even survive. I mean, if you don't know Italian in Italy, and you have a very good command of English, I'm sorry, but you can have a lot of difficulties. I can go here for a public in a public office and speak in English without any problem. That's forget about that. Even in a city like Milan, forget. You have to speak Italian, otherwise you have got troubles. So it's not a complaint. It's something for a prospective vision in how to improve the situation. And I think that having a really a common language for this, uh, supporting mobility and migration, I think it would be very, very important. And it will be something that should not be attached to a single state. That's why. So we come back to the previous point. In fact, it's very interesting that non-European migrants, when they heard about Esperanto, say, well, why you don't do that? This will be very nice, so I can move everywhere in Europe without any problem. Or the Chinese say, well, you have too many languages in Europe. I've made a lot of effort to learn a decent English, and then you say to me that it's not enough. Ouch. And if you think about these outside perspective from the outsides, I mean, they have a point. That's something on that we should reflect upon. And can you imagine how much that will change the market? I mean, a company in Texas can sell everything, anything in Washington D.C. and in Florida without any problem. We can't do that same if I have a company in the Netherlands and I wanted to go to Slovakia or Poland. Yeah, okay, English, yes, but I mean, it would be really nice to have something different. Yes, absolutely. The Charter of 1992 is still not, let's say, approved and ratified and put into action by all the member states. But that's even not enough. I think that we should really have a coordination of the educational systems of mandatory school level, and having literacy since the childhood in more languages, not only one. That would be really, really important. That is, of course, it's a tremendous effort because you have to invest in what? In training teachers. And there are very few countries that invest in that. Because you need people to be able to teach in more than one language, because that's the point. Because one thing that we should avoid is to attach the language to a discipline. I mean, I'm not in favor of saying, okay, we do, let's say, we do history in Dutch and maths in English. No, we should do both in both. So having hours or semesters or things like that in changing, so that your brain can have an overlap, and you have all the time this need to translate the content in different languages. And especially in the case of disciplines like philosophy or history, it's not neutral. I mean, if you study history in English, you have the English point of view. If you study that in Dutch, you have the Dutch point of view, which is very different. But imagine, when I have an experiment. As maybe you know, I teach interlinguistics in my classes. And the founding document is a convention, of course, but the founding document of the discipline is a letter by Descartes, written in 1629 here in Amsterdam to Mersenne. And it's written in French. And I open the letter You can download that from Gallica. It's very nice. So I download, even the typography is a bit different. And the first reaction of my students is, oh my gosh, how can we deal with that? The letter is only one page and a half. So, well, didn't have French in school? Most Dutch students have French in school, and I have international students, and sometimes I have also some let's say French speaking as a first language student. And we have in a half an hour we read the letter together, and we analyze that, and we contextualize that. They are absolutely astonished. In many cases, they say, it's the first time that I use French outside school after I finished high school. And I didn't know that I can read, I can interpret, I can access information. So access information in the first language and doing the translation together as a group, it's marvelous. But in order to do that, you have to prepare. And to prepare the ground for that, you can only do that through school. So, I mean, why not to teach mathematics showing the original sources that explain mathematics in Latin, in French, in German, in Italian? I mean, that will be something. Otherwise, it's completely detached from reality. Students do not know that analysis in maths was fundamental for the scientific revolution. So, as you can see, I have a lot of ideas on how to change the educational system in a more integrated way. And that will be, I think this will be the most important part for the European Union to go, because that will foster mobility in a different way from Erasmus. Erasmus is a great, and Comenius, great projects, but it's time to do something more, because they failed on one thing. They failed on intercultural communication, because by the end, what happened? They only fostered English, and that's it. And that was not the original plan for the Erasmus. So they were not fostering more multilingualism, what we really needed. With the pandemic, education is changed forever. I mean, the role of digitalization is not anymore under question. It's something that is taken for granted in all disciplines. You cannot say, well, I do not like to access the content management system of the university. You cannot say that. If you say something like that, you are fired, full stop. So I'm also changing my style because of that, because even if we will come back, let's say for having classes in presence, I will show videos prepared by myself, with myself explaining things, and having a sort of flipped classroom or something like that, because this is what students experienced during the pandemic, and they are changing their learning style. So we have to change our teaching style. That's the point. So I think that digitalization will become more and more important and central. The point is not technology. We have the technology. The point now is how to do good didactics. And this is not straightforward because nobody really knows. But it's also an exciting time to experiment.